welcome back to Fish Hunt Northwest, Dwayne England, the Barnum, and our first guest in studio on the Mobile Road Show, David Schamp, Hatchery Wild. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Took a day off from Bowie 10.
I know you did.
Just to drive all the way to Fife, Washington.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when I pulled in the parking lot, this place is an absolute madhouse.
Isn't it crazy?
Right.
I wound up parking well over a block away.
Yeah.
It is going on outside.
So you got your walk in this morning.
Right.
I
This
did.
afternoon. Perfect.
I did.
I like how he just said he took a day off from fishing Bowie 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that terrible? So it's a vacation day from fishing.
We were talking at the break, and retirement is not overrated.
No, not at
Fishing
all.
is where it's at, and you got to be pretty happy with the production of Bowie 10 this season going into it.
You know, we went into it with less than enthusiastic lookout, and it has started off on fire.
Yeah.
My first day fishing was Tuesday.
Right.
We were done at 8:30.
Wow.
We made one pass, we were done. Get this, we had 7 bites, 7 hookups, and landed all 7 fish. How often do you get
One
to do
drag.
that? One drag, it was done.
Triple sevens, right? You just hit the jackpot.
And the guys fishing with me were like, already?
Now what do we do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We go have breakfast.
I
There
take
you
it
go.
you weren't using those faulty hooks, you know, the ones that are missing the barb there?
No, actually, we're using those new owner herring hooks.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Those things are rock solid, let me
Right.
tell you. So the next day, you go back out with high expectations, right? You crush them on Tuesday,
Yep.
Wednesday,
Yep.
all day, fish till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, had 1 keeper.
And you know what's crazy is when you are fishing throughout a week like that, your tides maintain consistency.
Yeah.
They're just 45 minutes later.
Yep.
So you would think, well, okay, we're going to leave the same time because we might pick up that early fish on, the bottom end of the outgo or whatever the structure of the tide is. But you're like, well, we might as well just do it again. We'll go fish the same areas, same bait. We know what works.
Right.
And you go out there and get blanked. I've talked to a handful of guys this year that have just absolutely crushed them. They go out, same tactics, same techniques. They get a handful of hours into the morning, and they're like, what the heck? Nothing's changed. Barometers stayed the same. Weather systems haven't changed. Barnum, we've seen this. Happens on the Willowpot, happens in Puget Sound.
Right.
I think what it is?
And I think really on the Columbia estuary, it's just the fact that those fish are moving. They're not hanging around. They're on the move.
Yep.
But at this point, we've got good Chinook tides. We've got the
Right.
real flat tides, so
Right.
they're not moving a lot.
Right.
So we expected that they would still be hanging in the
Right.
same general vicinity. No.
Now you
So-
get blanked.
But we've had a
Tuesday
little
you
different-
crush them.
Go ahead.
Wednesday 1 fish. Thursday we crushed them
Yep.
again in the same spot we crushed them on Tuesday.
Yep.
So then you go back on Friday. No.
Right.
So I don't know what's up.
This year
with
has
those.
been a little different weather year for the typical August, though. I mean, we keep having these little low pressure fronts come in
Yep.
and bring some rain and some fresh water. Where normally in August, we're 95 degrees every day. Going,
Yeah.
oh my God.
How about the dry lightning last night?
Yeah.
I haven't had sunglasses on all week in Astoria,
Oh.
and it dumped last night. It rained
Yeah.
really good. So,
Yep.
so to a degree, I'm glad I'm not out there,
Take a day off.
to be honest with you.
It can be a grind.
Yeah.
It can be a bit of a grind. You don't want to push it so hard you're no longer enjoying yourself. Sometimes you got to take a break, and just day off, come sit here and talk to these fine folks and not just talk about fishing. Let's get right into it. Hatchery and Wild. Your guys' your Facebook page is blowing up nicely since the last time we met.
Yeah.
You've kind of changed the campaign a little bit. Same message for the most part. You guys are getting it out there. What's going on with Hatchery and Wild?
Well, let me give you an update on 3 fronts, okay? So I'll talk about how we're changing our narrative, how the message is changing, and we've got a big update coming there. I'll tell you how we're going as far as developing our partnerships. That has been off the hook. We're really excited about what's going on in that arena. And then finally, if we have time, I want to follow up with a capital campaign that we're just getting launched.
Yeah.
So first of all, what we're trying to do when it comes to the Hatchery and Wild Coexist campaign is change the narrative. For the last 20 years, hatcheries have been getting a bad rap. They are being blamed for the demise of our wild fish. And that's simply not true. If you look at our hatcheries, why they're there and what they're intended to do, without hatcheries, in many, many cases, we wouldn't have the fisheries that we enjoy today. In Oregon, 2/3 of the hatcheries are mitigation hatcheries. So they are hatcheries that are designed and constructed to mitigate for the loss of wild natural production. Production that's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. There's not an opportunity for those fish to reproduce in the wild. That was acknowledged.
Yeah.
That deal was made a century ago.
Right.
And this just isn't like, somebody throwing random thoughts out there on paper. This is scientific data.
Right.
This has been proven. There are those that are disputing the message from Hatchery Wild and disputing your information you're bringing out here to the people. And they're saying there's no scientific backup on that. And I dispute their claims because there is. There is plenty of evidence and science and data that you guys are supporting this information with.
Well, when it comes to the science, there's contradicting science.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of studies out there that show that hatchery fish are bad for wild fish. Or I shouldn't say bad for wild fish. That's a misrepresentation. So the science shows that hatchery fish have an effect on wild fish. Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, everything has an effect on everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Checks and balances.
So that's a layup. So you add a hatchery fish into the natural environment to say that it's going to have an effect on the natural environment, that's a given, right? So in the last 20 years, there have been studies that actually show that hatchery fish can have a positive effect on wild fish. And then there are many studies that show no effect. Now, that's where you get controversial, right? Because I just said a study showing no effect.
Right.
But at the same time, we acknowledge everything's going to have an effect, right? So to say there's no effect is getting somewhere you really don't want to be, particularly from a science standpoint. So we qualify that with no quantifiable effect, so no measurable major effect on abundance or reproductivity. Mm-hmm. So they're having an effect, but what is the significance of that effect? And just our own experience shows that it's not having the effect that the anti-hatchery folks want us to believe.
Well, and for years we've been fed this understanding that the competitive nature or the competition for survivability in hatchery fish competing in rivers, in estuaries for the survivability of these wild fish. And, there were those that weighed in and said, well, it's because we're dumping too many fish into the system. The wild fish are not finding enough food source. They're being, overtaken by all these hatchery fish. And you got to think back to 75 years ago, long before man intervened in really messing up our fisheries. And the rivers around here, Puget Sound and beyond, were just teeming with fish. And it was a natural cycle of fish spawning and dying, decomposing, adding nutrient base to the systems, and their offspring's survivability numbers were extremely high. I get all that, but back then we didn't have the imbalance of habitat loss. We didn't have the silt runoff from all the years of logging in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We didn't have the lack of shade on our water systems and upper systems to where the water temperatures now have increased. We had pristine habitat for these fish to rear in and survive. But even early on, when we started dumping the hatchery fish in, it wasn't the numbers of hatchery fish that were the demise of the wild fish. It was just an inability of overall survivability, and we then saw those hatchery numbers continue to go down too. But then they got to a point they said, well, it's all caused by hatchery fish, so we're going to remove all them from the systems.
Right.
And we have not seen in 25 years these wild fish come back.
Right.
That whole thing that they've brainwashed us with to say remove the hatchery fish, the wild fish will rebuild, it hasn't happened. Now we're up against the orca, catastrophic dying off of our orcas.
Right.
And all the research and studies that have gone in to support that. And if you're in the camp of still not believing in the necessity of getting these hatchery numbers back, you are in the camp of saying, well, the orca is just the next flag that these hatchery, supporters want to carry. Well, they got to find a reason, right, Barnum, to dump hatchery fish in the waters.
Well, let's think about a situation we have right now where we have hundreds of thousands of sea lions that we haven't seen sea lion populations like this maybe in 100 years. So if you go into a situation now and you shut down hatcheries and aren't putting out a food source for these sea lions, the native fish runs are going to get obliterated coming into the estuary because there's going to be no volume of fish for those sea lions to feed on, so that the hope of a native fish can make it through.
Yep.
You know, you're going to release 300,000 sea lions on a reducing number of native fish, and they're just going to go extinct in 4 or 5 years.
And they're a lot faster, more equipped, and higher numbers than the orcas. They're going to get to the salmon first.
Yep.
They're going to get to the outbounding smolt first. The harbor seal in the South Sea is one of the #1 predation problems on the outmigrating smolt. It doesn't matter if it's hatchery or wild, right? The numbers are there, and they're consuming mass quantities of millions of pounds. And now the returning adult salmon are intercepted, and the orcas are starving. We get that. It's not just a ploy. It's not just a bunch of hatchery managers, Dave, that say, hey, we got to find some slogan or campaign to increase our hatchery numbers. No, there's, again, a lot of evidence and proof that we do need to get these hatchery numbers back up. We have areas of Puget Sound. Hatchery production has been diminished since the 90s by 65 and 75%. We're talking millions of salmon no longer being pushed into these systems. So as we move forward and changing the narrative, getting folks to understand that putting hatchery fish back into these systems is not detrimental to survivability, until we get habitat back to where it needs to be for the wild fish to slowly begin to rebuild, we have to support and supplement with hatchery fish.
Absolutely, and there are many examples out there where it can be shown that hatchery fish actually increase the abundance of wild fish.
Right.
So done properly, hatchery fish can be good for wild fish.
Do you have some of those examples?
And that's what we're advocating for, is changing our hatchery practices to where we're producing the most fit fish possible.
Right.
So fish that can survive in the native or the wild environment and have the least possible effect on those wild populations.
Right.
So you look at the sockeye. They were down to what, 2 fish?
Yeah.
1 fish?
On the snake?
And they've been able to rebuild that entire run through a properly designed hatchery system. So we're not saying all hatcheries are good. We recognize that past hatchery practices are not what we would like them to be, and we need to make some changes. But that's going to take a reinvestment in our hatchery system, not deciding we're just going to shut it down and shutter up all of our hatcheries. That's not the direction
Well, as we
should be
discussed
going.
before when you were in studio, past practices were more down the line of, high numbers are good. And I kind of would throw a phrase out there like, we basically took a certain strain of Chinook and carpet bombed the entire Puget Sound with it, to a point that we mixed stocks, mixed genetics, and we have this compromise now of genetic strains that every contributing water base in the Puget Sound has a certain DNA factor that's equivalent. And then the other majority part of that is the genetic line of that existing fish that was there previously. So we have a mixed stock. Now what we're talking about, and if you've been following our show, you know that we advocate for this and are on board with everything you guys are promoting and doing, this in-basin broodstock management program that we need to achieve. And if we just look at the Puget Sound Basin, if we have Nisqually stock, and we're going to have David Trout in here later on talking about this specifically, we're keeping those within basin. Yeah, there may be a skosh of Chambers Creek in there. There may be some type of mixture in that DNA footprint, but it is what it is now, and it needs to remain what it is now. Right? We're not going back to what it was.
We can't go back and undo what's been done.
Nope.
But we can start here and do better going forward.
Yep. Skagit fish, whatever the DNA footprint of those are now, broodstocking within basin, that's what they are moving forward. If you drop down a little further south, we get into Green River, Puyallup, all the way down to Nisqually. Those basins, as they are now, recognized. And same thing's going on in Oregon. They almost set the bar for broodstocking, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're ahead of the curve there. So
big time.
That's a good thing. That's
you have some of the rivers down in Oregon that have shown an increase in fish coming back now that we're broodstocking some of these Chinook programs?
Well, whether it's Chinook or Steelhead or whatever, but you look at the Sandy Basin, you can look at the Clackamas Basin where they have used hatcheries to surrogate back the numbers of our wild fish. So again, if you go to our website, we actually have a list of examples there. So for me to sit here and try to give you a list off the top of my head, you're not going to get an accurate one.
It is all listed there. I remember reading through it before.
Right. And so, which that's a good segue to talk a little bit about our website. So
Yeah.
it's intended to provide good, solid information for folks that have an interest in this subject. We didn't get it right the first time. We can do better, and we are doing better. We've listened to the feedback that we've got. A lot of it is criticism. A lot of it is, hey, do this instead of that. We've listened, and this week we'll be putting online a very significant rewrite of the information on our website.
Oh, okay.
Again, responding to the feedback that we're getting from folks to make sure that we're giving the best information that we can in a way that's meaningful and helpful to them. Real quick, the campaign itself. So the last time we talked, we probably had a handful of folks that were on board and supporting Hatchery Wild Coexist.
Yep.
One of the very first was Sportco, I
Yeah.
want to say. They
Yeah.
stepped up right in the very beginning. Huge uplift for us. Fish Hunt Northwest was right there in the very beginning.
Yep.
Well, you guys should be happy to know at this point you've got about 65 additional companies and organizations that have jumped on board with you
That's
to
outstanding.
support our campaign.
Yeah.
If you follow us on Facebook, we try to acknowledge every organization and every business partner that jumps on board. We can't keep up. That's how
Good.
exciting the news has been there.
Yeah.
And it just continues to snowball. So
Right.
we're really excited. We've had folks that want to a list of the organizations and businesses that have signed on so they can support those businesses. That list is changing so fast, it really wouldn't do them a lot of good. So here's what we're suggesting. When you do business, ask them if they support Hatchery Wild Coexist.
That's a good
If
point.
they say no, ask them why not. And give them the information.
Right.
Show them how they can contact us, and then that provides an opportunity for us to contact them and get them on board. We'll do the follow-up. We just need folks to extend a hand and say, hey, this is a good program. We think you should support it.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's how we change the narrative. Everybody talking to everybody reaching out and gaining strength in unity and in numbers. You know, the Patagonia artificial documentary that many have seen.
It's on my list here to ask you, so
you
thanks
know,
for bringing it up.
They tear up hatcheries.
They do.
So how many have seen Artificial?
Anybody watch it?
Has anybody seen it? Right, so those of you that haven't seen it, I'm going to ruin the ending for you. So if you don't want to know the way it ends, cover your ears.
Yeah.
But at the very end, they put up a great big black screen, and in huge white letters it says, hatcheries and fish farms are driving our wild fish to extinction. So they blame hatcheries, and they say that a fish farm and a hatchery are the same thing, and we all know that's not the case. That the reason our wild fish numbers are declining is because of hatcheries. As I just said early on, 2/3 of our hatcheries are there to mitigate for the loss of natural production. So if hatcheries go away, you got nothing.
Yeah.
70% of the salmon and steelhead harvested in Oregon come from hatcheries.
Right.
80% of the salmon and steelhead swimming in the Columbia River come from hatcheries.
If hatcheries go away,
Fishing
you're going to
goes
be
away.
buying your fish from fish farmed, raised fish in pens, which are inundated with disease, chemicals,
Orcas are going to
antibiotics.
starve.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's
So Patagonia wants you to believe that all we have to do is close all of our hatcheries, and bang, overnight, all of our wild fish come back, and the orcas have more fish to eat than they know what to do with.
which is a pipe dream, because we've already discussed and we've proven that the past 25 years, the major cutbacks we've seen in our hatchery production has not lent its hand at bringing back wild fish already. So to simply remove all hatchery fish and think that that's going to be the catalyst to get these fish to all of a sudden come back is an absolute absurd pipe dream.
You know, I think Patagonia is really trying to do the right thing. I think they are truly trying to act on behalf of our wild fish, and who's not for that, right?
Yep.
We need to do everything we can to improve our wild fish numbers, but they are obviously misguided when it comes to the information that they're using. And unfortunately, I think they're doing a huge misservice.
I do too.
Because they're
Absolutely.
talking to folks that don't know the difference between a bluegill and a Chinook salmon.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. Not everybody fishes, not everybody knows about these fisheries like we do.
Right.
It's just not their world.
No.
So they're relying on that information they're getting from Patagonia, and it is false.
Right.
And that should scare the bejesus
Well, and
out
I
of
think a lot of it
anybody
is
that's
Patagonia
interested
is
in-
relying on the information that they're getting from the fish advocacy groups,
Right.
and it's jaded, completely jaded.
It is
Completely
biased
jaded.
Yeah.
beyond.
And it's money driven.
Yes.
Right.
And they're marketing it to, as you just kind of mentioned, to all of those persons, the percentage of our populations that don't fish and hunt and don't truly grasp
Right.
it. They're hitting the major
Exactly.
metropolitan areas,
Big time.
people who live in these major cities and are not outdoorsy folks because it's all about the money.
You are not going to see a Wild Fish Conservancy booth in front of Sportco during the tent sale.
Absolutely not.
It's not going to happen
No.
because they know that you're
Political
educated
suicide,
and
right?
you know
You're
the
not going to be
difference.
jaded by their false
Right.
information. So we got to fight it on our hands.
Right, and that's how we counter it.
Right.
Obviously, Patagonia, huge company, deep resources, deep pockets. We don't have that.
Right.
So the way we counter it is by forming a huge coalition
Yep.
of interested people, supporting businesses and
Yep.
organizations. Our voice needs to be louder than their voice.
Right.
And so that's the second item. First is look for an update on our webpage. Second, encourage the businesses that you support to support us. Go to our webpage, sign on. We've got an opportunity there for you to join the fight. It doesn't cost you anything to be a part of this. Same is true for your business friends. We're not going to hit them up for a donation in order to be a part of Hatchery Wild Coexist. And the third thing I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to talk about just real briefly is we're starting a capital campaign to fund an economic study. So we can get into a debate about the science when it comes to hatcheries versus wild, right? Because there's science in their favor and there's science in our favor. But when you look at the economics of our fisheries, it is huge.
Huge.
Everybody in the Pacific Northwest somehow, from a business standpoint, is connected to our salmon and steelhead fisheries.
Yep.
Whether it's a service station, a restaurant, a hotel, a car dealership, obviously boat manufacturers and sporting goods stores are a direct connection, the guiding industry, everybody somehow has a link to our salmon and steelhead fisheries, and they need to be concerned about what's happening. The anti-hatchery narrative is getting louder. In Oregon, some of you may be familiar with the Leeburg hatchery. It is one of those mitigation hatcheries that I talked about earlier, built by the Corps of Engineers, maintained by the Corps of Engineers, until 2 years ago when they decided they were going to walk away from it.
Yeah.
Gave the state of Oregon the opportunity to take over that hatchery. We were able to get funding for 1 year. This last legislative session, we went back to get funding for additional years. The governor didn't include it in her budget. It took all the way until the very last minutes of the legislative session to get funding approved by the legislature for that hatchery. The final minutes of the legislative session.
Did Kay Brown now sign off on this?
The governor had 30 days, great segue. The governor had 30 days to sign that bill to
Right.
author, and she had line item veto. So she could go in and cut out the funding for the hatchery without affecting funding for other
Right.
things in that bill. She signed it on the 27th day.
Oh, she did finally sign it.
She has signed it, so
you and I
great
talked
news
last
there.
week, she hadn't signed it.
We,
Yeah.
we got the funding for Leeburg, but I think folks need to realize that that's really a wake-up call.
Right.
Right? So it wasn't that she signed it, but a message is being sent. The Oregon League of Conservation Voters, which is the largest, most influential environmental group in the state of Oregon, actually sent the governor a letter asking that she veto the funding for
Oh, really?
the Leeburg hatchery.
Okay.
So again, the anti-hatchery
Yep.
proponents are getting larger and louder, and we need to be positioned to counter that.
Yeah, we sure do.
And in Washington State, we're in a tough spot because we know we have the WDFW budget woes.
Yep.
We know that these organizations like the Pound the Fish and Wildlife Agency have
Yep.
litigation. So what's the easiest way to eliminate the litigation is to just use the budget woes as a way to start closing hatcheries.
Absolutely.
And we're at a really scary spot right now.
Yep.
Really scary
Yep.
spot.
They're gaining numbers, as you said. It's all driven by money. And our voice just needs to be louder than theirs. And we need to continue the fight and continue to educate folks on the necessity of hatcheries to, sustain our fishery opportunity, keep the recreational folks on the water, keep the money dumping into the economics. There's a much bigger picture of this thing than just, us getting our opportunity to go out on the water, which we all enjoy.
Right.
But that is the end result if everything goes in the right direction as it should.
Right.
So
a big 2-page ad in the last issue of Salmon Trout Steelheader magazine that launches that campaign. Everybody asks about sweatshirts and hats. Everybody wants to wear some Hatchery and Wild Coexist swag. This is your chance. Mm-hmm. So check out that ad. It will be in the next issue of Salmon and Steelhead Journal. There will also be an ad in the next issue, I believe, one of the next 2 issues of Sportsman's Magazine. So the word's out there. This is your chance to support directly activities within the campaign. We want to be totally transparent.
Yeah.
We want to tell folks what we're spending the money on.
Right.
We're a totally volunteer organization, so it's slackies like me that are spending our personal time making this thing happen. So no, the money's not going in anybody's pocket. I'm not going out and buying a new boat with your dollars. We're using that money for specific purposes to move this campaign forward.
Perfect. Well, you're doing a great job. Everybody here is nodding their head in support of Hatchery and Wild Coexist.
I got stickers for everybody.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we hand those out at the break. Appreciate you making the drive, man. Always good to see you. Appreciate your involvement and your continued efforts, and we support you guys 100% moving forward. So,
thank you for the
awesome.
opportunity to share the information with you great folks here.
Perfect. All right. Appreciate give Dave a round of applause there, if we would. Nicely done.
Keep up the good work.
All right, we're going to jump out for a break. You're going to hand out stickers and information packets. We're going to do a couple raffles, give away some prizes or Sheng. So we'll do that. We come back. We're going to do a little how-to segment on some bobber and egg fishing, one of my favorite times of the year. Get you guys spooled up and ready for fall tributaries, which is just around the corner. So we want to be on top of that. Don't go anywhere. Jump out for a break. A couple folks here are going to win some nice prizes as we go to commercial. We'll be back right here on FHN.